Startup Grind is a global event designed to educate, inspire, and connect startup founders and entrepreneurs all over the globe. Omaha is one of the newest chapters, and we're excited to be able to represent Omaha in this global startup community and also bring some of those resources here to Omaha and shine a spotlight on some of the really cool stories, success stories in startups and technology in Omaha. The monthly events that we provide an opportunity to spotlight these entrepreneurs that have worked in these different startups from the early stages and tell that story of how these startups became the powerhouse companies that they are in Omaha today. It's also an opportunity for all of you to network and get to meet each other and have those kind of random collisions, those serendipitous connections that we all know are so important when you're working in startups and in the entrepreneur space. Before we dive into the talk with Chad, and I introduce Chad a little bit more, I want to just quickly discuss the local partners. The local partners include Biso Studio, who is Nebraska's local startup studio. Biso Studio partners with startups to fill out their team in software development, marketing, organizational services, and help introduce to investors and provide advice and those sorts of things. They really act as a partner through the whole entire process. The Nebraska Tech Collaborative is the Exarban Foundation's workforce initiative with the sole mission of attracting, developing, and retaining tech talent and entrepreneurs in Nebraska. The NTC has 4 main goals: to increase the number of tech workers by 10,000 in 2025, which is a pretty hefty goal, but they are doing everything they can to make that happen. It's to improve diversity of tech workers, making sure all additional workers represent 40% women and 20% underrepresented groups, create 300 new tech companies in the next 5 years, and raise Nebraska's tech profile to highlight the incredible talent and businesses that are here in the state already. We have Event Vesta, who is one of the startups that is here. That's Andrew back there. It's his company. One of the companies that IC Adventures has invested in. They are a local startup that is trying to become the event platform of choice. They actually just launched their app today. So if you go to the App Store, you can look up Event Vesta.
Take it out now. Do it.
But after the event, I'll remind you to do that at the end of the event. But it's great.
You get free drink.
I also really like they have a promoter service where normally if you're promoting an event, you have to create a profile on all of these different community calendars to try to get it out. Basically what Event Vesta does is you create it once and they send it out to all of the local calendars that exist. And they have that available in most cities throughout the US already. It's a really great service and they provide that to Startup Grind. And IC Adventures is a business creation engine located here in the Ralston Hinge Opportunity Zone, which Chad will talk a little bit more about later. Their passion is to help businesses and communities achieve success. They turn startups into profitable businesses and rejuvenate opportunity zone communities like this one. They're working on this Granary project here, which is huge. And again, we'll dive a little bit more into that. That's actually what this is right here. And that will bring us to talking about Chad.
Hey.
So welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
Now that we're through all of that, I'm happy to have everyone here.
Well done.
So Chad is an investor and advisor at IC Adventures here and part of the Granary District Real Estate Project. He previously worked at Sojern. You were one of the original members of Sojern.
Yep.
You worked with Gordon, who is the founder of Sojern.
Gordon's back here in the back, and CEO and general partner of IC Adventures and the whole project. So,
yes.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for
staying late working.
We'll see how long it lasts.
So Sojern, if you're not familiar with Sojern is a local company that in 2018 was valued at $350 million. The company originally launched with a boarding pass advertisement product and later developed data partnerships pivoting to connecting travelers with as they search and book trips online. I'm sure Chad can talk a little bit more of the details of what that looked like. Today, Sojern has offices all over the world, and obviously they were impacted quite a bit by COVID, but they've begun to make that rebound. So let's start with Chad. We'll talk about Sojern, but let's talk you personally. What is your background? What led you to where you're at now and your work that you did at Sojern?
So yeah, my background, I started off in the nonprofit sector. So that's where I got my start. I was actually a youth pastor working with middle school and high school kids. And so that was a great starting point. 'Cause one, you learned how to wrangle, who are all the millennials now. So I've gotten pretty old over the years. But one of the cool things about that is I really learned about, it's pretty easy to motivate volunteers for a short amount of time. But if you're going to motivate volunteers for the long term, you got to understand what are their strengths, what are their passions, how do you help them actually engage and get excited about what they're doing. So I learned that in the nonprofit world, which really helped me as I moved into kind of the business world. And actually, Gordon gave me great job at Intuit. So Intuit is TurboTax, QuickBooks, Quicken software company. So Gordon had gotten there because he had sold his company, It's Deductible, to Intuit. So I ran a partnership there and just had the opportunity to learn from a Fortune 500 company that was also one of the top 100 greatest places to work. So we learned a lot about culture and investment that we were able to take over into Sojern, which was pretty big. So then Gordon came up with the idea of Sojern on a boarding pass. He was holding a boarding pass one day, and he would fly back and forth to California all the time from Omaha. And all the time they kept trying to get him to move to, San Diego. And he's like, why do I want to? I can be here in the Midwest and live in a nice house and a normal part of living, but I'll just travel. And he's holding that boarding pass. And he thinks to himself, man, these airlines know who I am. They know where I'm going. There's all this wrapped up demographics into who travelers are that, they're highly influential people. And so that's when the idea of Sojern came. So we're the first company to create the online printed boarding passes. So that's how we got our start.
Cool. So let's fast forward real quick to kind of what Sojern is today, so that then we can kind of get the context of kind of why that matters to kind of go back and talk about that story of scaling Sojern.
Yeah. Well, I mean, today Sojern, let's talk post-COVID, right? So about 2018, it was valued at $350 million that you talked about. We got some of the largest data partnerships with the largest airlines, online travel agencies, travel meta search sites in the country. So we have pixels on their search, purchase, and confirmation pages. So we'd capture all that data, we'd curate it, and then activate it through, multiple different DSPs and worked with, I think, 96% of the Fortune 500 travel brands. And the last couple years, we made a pivot. Throughout the years, we did a lot of different things, but the last couple years, we kind of doubled down on travel. So, of course, when COVID hit, basically, we had 600 employees, 14 locations all over the world, doing close to $150 million a year in ad spend. And so once that hit, we went from about $400,000 a day in ad spend down to about $150, down to, when things really hit, down to about, I think, $6, which Ed may even know better. So we've got a few Sojern peeps in the house too. So let me know if I'm off on any numbers, because I'm a sales guy. So
I can see him back there going,
Brad, you're a sales guy, so your numbers will look like mine. But Ed, and great story, Ed right here actually worked with Gordon at It's Deductible. They got bought by Intuit, came over and worked with us at Intuit, and then also came with us to Sojern. And so,
well, that just must be a testament to Gordon as an entrepreneur, that everyone's willing to follow you around wherever you're coming up with ideas.
I just pay really, really good.
That's what that these other guys don't.
Pays in beer.
So what was your role early on in Sojern? And I know you eventually moved into the enterprise sales. That wasn't where you started, right?
Yeah, no. So at Intuit, I did partnerships, so there was a sales piece in there, but I also did a lot of our executive coaching and team leadership and development, so I had a piece in the HR stuff. So when we started Sojern, I was the only guy who had a degree in HR, and I was doing the HR stuff before, and so so when we started the company, I ran HR, got all our benefits in place, got some of our initial key people hired, and then that was a little bit of that's where I started. fell into sales a little bit because we had hired some big sales gunners on the East Coast and the West Coast, and they were going after all the huge companies, and we were brand new. You didn't know us yet, right? And Gordon comes into my office one day and he goes, "We need a bird dog team. When people go hunting and they got a dog and it points in the direction of where the birds are, it's like, I want you to get a handful of people." He's like, "Start sending out emails, call people. Let's get some leads to give to these salespeople so they can start selling," because we just weren't selling. And so a group of us started bird dogging, and I got some great leads, and I handed it off to our sales guys, and they were just crap in the bed. And I go, Gordon's like, "What's going?" I'm like, "Dude, I had these people on the hook. I need to just close them." And he goes, "Go close them." And that's
Yeah.
one of the great things about Gordon as an entrepreneur, as a founder, of helping understand what are your strengths, what are you passionate about, what are you really good at, and then also allowing you to go try some things. It's like, who cares if you fail? I mean, we weren't doing anything anyway. He's like, "Go close them." So within 4 months, I was our number one sales guy, and Gordon's like, "You're done in HR. Like you're selling." And so never turned back. So thank goodness.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's so valuable to have. And what do you think that made that different? Like, what were you doing that they weren't doing? Was it just like being ruthless about the closing, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we found out in the early days some of the salespeople we hired were really good order takers. I mean, when you're at a startup and it's new, you got to grind. I mean, sending out emails, making phone calls, being strategic. The other piece is they were going after these really big accounts, which was great. Yeah, if you close that's going to be a lot of money, but we were brand new, we were a startup, no one knew who we were. So for me, it was grinding and then thinking strategically, are there some like people we can really work with that make a lot of sense? And kind of we fell into airport parking. We never thought that airport parking would, that's not who we had on our initial slide to our investors. We're going to go work with airport parking guys. But guess what? We started calling them, and we found out, one, they loved the $5 discount on the boarding pass that someone would get 24 hours before. Two, they actually paid on time, and it was a great ROI, right? So for me, I realized that was a niche, so I just worked that niche, and within a year and a half or 2 years, we had a $3 million just of airport parking, right? Yeah. So part of it was being strategic, finding a niche, working that niche, and just grinding, working really hard.
What do you think, if someone is maybe in their own startup and they're working on their own sales, or they are in sales in startups, how can they start thinking like that if they're not really doing that already?
Well, I think, one, and this is another thing that Gordon's always been great at, it's entrepreneurs. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make is they decide that I want to be an entrepreneur because, first of all, how many of you in here are like solopreneurs? Raise your hand. Few, okay. And then how many are part of startups? And then the rest of you just random, people, yeah. All right, good. Or college or whatever. Collaborate, yeah, that's awesome. Well, and it's interesting, as we meet and talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, one of the things is you love the freedom and you want to work for yourself and you want to kind of have that autonomy. One of the great things about Gordon is Gordon has always been about partnerships, right? I mean, Sojern doesn't ever make it if he doesn't go out and work with the consortium of the largest airlines in the world, right? And he got them all in a room at the same time, which it's probably a terrible idea because lawyers hated each other. They're all yelling at one another. So we picked them off. But Gordon's always been about collaboration. How do you partner? How do you bring people in? Give more away and keep a smaller piece of the pie and grow that pie a lot bigger, right? And so a lot of entrepreneurs think, I'm going to keep 90% of my company and I'm only going to give 10% away. Well, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to take you a lot longer to grow that. But if you're strategic, make those partnerships. It's like that
classic saying of I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but it's like 90% of $100,000 is $90,000. 10% of $1 billion company is a lot more than that.
Yeah. But you're right. And that's a big piece that is entrepreneurs. So think about partnerships, think about strategic partnerships, think about people that you really like, that you believe in, that you trust. I mean, that's the other piece with Gordon. He's had people who's worked with him for 30 years, right? Because he empowers people, figures out what they're good at, lets them go make it and make it happen.
Yeah, and pays them well.
Yeah, and pays them well.
So as Sojern started to grow, as you started to build out the sales funnel there and that process of what were some of the growing pains that you saw, maybe not even just within like your department, but in general, that Sojern started to see as it started to get bigger?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things as a company organization, you're always pivoting, right? So
Right.
handful of years in, we realized that we were going to run out of scale if we were just going to be a boarding pass company. Only so many people print off boarding passes. And that's where the partnership and the relationship with the airlines and the fact that we had worked so well and we were great partners with the airlines early on built a lot of trust that they allowed us to put those pixels on the search, purchase, and confirmation pages, start to capture that data, right? So in the early days, it was about pivoting and realizing, okay, we can take this from a potential $10 million business to a $100 million business by making that shift. So, and as you grow, you get the natural growing pains, right? You start to create silos because you have multiple offices and everyone used to work together. You know, one of the things that Gordon says a lot too is he says, act like an owner. When you are a part of a startup, you're in the early, you act like an owner. Do the things that an owner would do. And as companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, you start to act kind of just to take care of yourself. Or maybe you're beyond yourself and you just think about your team. So that creates silos and different things. And obviously, as you grow, you've got to do better with your processes and all the different things. So those were probably some of the challenges as you grow to keep that culture. And that was a big thing. You know, you can cast vision and you can get people to be a part of your startup or to be a part of your company by casting vision. But culture is what keeps them, right, long term, and how you invest in them and develop them and grow that. And so as your company gets bigger and bigger, it's really hard to keep that culture intact.
Yeah, I know that Sojern did a lot of like, you had the conference thing where you're bringing people that were in different, because that's a big thing. Once you go to different offices, like how do you keep that culture across multiple offices and things like, I know Sojern as a pretty good employee brand, right? A talent brand, right? Like there definitely was some work, especially, I don't know if that was always the case, but later on done to like, how do we brand this towards talent? We want the best talent to come apply and want to work here and keep people there, I'm sure too.
Yeah. Part of that's a culture. And it's like you're saying, I mean, we started early on saying, okay, we're going to get everyone together, all the offices together at least once a year. And as we grew into 14 different offices all over the world, we flew people in from APAC and, you know, all over the world to come to have that moment, to all be together, to have the vision, to have the direction, to rally the troops. And I think that was really big. It became really costly towards the end. You know, you're flying in 500 people and, you know, 200 of them are from all over the world. But some of the things you try and do to build culture and invest in one another. And I think the other big things that's hard when you scale, and one of the other, I think, things that people fail as companies as well, is you have people who are really good at their job, and then you tell them that, oh, if you want to be promoted, you need to become a manager. And that's great unless the person hates people, right? And so you may be great at sales or you may be great at customer service or whatever. So create opportunities to promote them and pay them well and keep them as an account manager. If they suck with people or they don't like people, they don't want to add value to people, don't make them a manager. Like don't make them a leader, right? They're not a leader. And so I think as companies get big, it's easy to just start promoting people because they're really good at their job rather than saying, hey, we want to make sure that we put people in these positions that's going to keep the culture intact, that's going to add value to people. It's going to understand people's strengths and weaknesses and triggers and what levers you need to pull to help them be successful. And, people say it all the time, right? People, they don't leave a company, they leave a manager. So when you have people that are investing in you and pouring into you, and that was a big part of our culture. And as we got bigger and bigger, that became harder.
Yeah. I think you see that in I think everyone's probably experienced that at some point, maybe even being that person, right? That's really good at a specific position, and they put you in a position of management. And you're like, I don't know how to manage people. And they can throw as much training at you as you want. If you're not that type of person, you're not that type of person. Like, you might just be a software developer and be a really good software developer. A solutions architect or something. It's like, you should just stay in that role. Like, you should not. And to your point, on the company side, creating those opportunities so that you keep that talent and you can make sure they're getting, paid appropriately for their experience without necessarily making them be in charge of people that they're going to make their lives miserable.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to watch out for HR, because they'll just do stupid stuff like that where they're like, oh, here's all our bands and what you have to do and this and that. And it's like, if somebody's really good at their job, keep paying them well, give them opportunities to grow and expand and develop. You don't make them a manager if they're not good in managing people.
So on the sales side, I know that since you were involved in the HR and then also in the sales, what was it like trying to attract sales talent? And do you have any kind of insights in that of, like, basically attracting sales talent that is going to do a good job, and then also retaining sales talent as they realize they're great and they could go work somewhere, potentially make more money at some bigger company?
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, that's one of the things. If you look back at Sojern and you look at the tenure for our salespeople, most of the time our salespeople didn't leave. I mean, they stayed. Because one, we had great account managers. We were flexible, and we made campaigns actually work for our companies. We gave our salespeople autonomy, and so we're fortunate. I mean, most of our salespeople stayed, and I think that was a big success factor for us as a company, that our salespeople didn't leave, because we did set a good culture and give them opportunities. And then if somebody did leave, it was pretty easy to get people to come in to take that role, and that was pretty big. I mean, I think that was a key component to our success. And the other thing is too, I remember early on we hired this guy, I don't even remember where he was from, Gordon, like GE or something like this in the early days, and he was like this sales consultant. He's like, you need a person in every city. Like, he had this like 30-person sales team that he wanted us to go out and Gordon's like, we're not doing that, So the other thing is, hire really good salespeople and give them opportunities and territory to grow and expand too. So if you throw salespeople on top of one another, then you're going to have a hard time keeping people as well. So we hired a lot less people, gave them more territory to go and expand into. And I think that was a big piece to our success.
Yeah, that's really smart. I've worked in sales departments. I've been a sales manager before and had my own salespeople piling over each other on the same leads and and it's kind of a mess. Yeah. And no salesperson wants to work like that. They want to just have free reign to go and say, here's your region, make it happen.
Own it. Own your business.
And here's some mentorship from some people that are maybe already in the company and are already doing a good job. Like that, those kind of things are important too, especially when you have people that aren't as veteran. But
for sure. No, it's a big piece of success of building a really good sales team.
So what do you think? I think, Sojern specifically, any kind of B2B startup, that sales piece is so important. What do you think how important do you think that was in the success of Sojern?
I mean, it's critical, right? Make the right partnerships and connect with the right relationships, and you got to work hard. I mean, a lot of times people on the outside, if you haven't done sales before, you're like, sales guy or gal, what are they doing? You look on Facebook, they're just taking people out to nice steak dinners, and you're like, what are these guys even working? These gals even working? What are they doing, right? But to be successful in sales, you got to build really good relationships. You have to build trust very quickly. You got to understand people's pain points and how can you solve them and develop those. And man, you got to work. You got to organize yourself, and you got to prospect and grind to be successful. So Those are all the pieces I think that are critical in the early days of being able to do that. And find a salesperson that's hungry, that'll work hard, give them some ownership in your company. Don't be stingy. Let them grow, pay them well, and and it will pay off.
I see a lot of startups, especially early on, be like, I want you to be a salesperson. Like, I want you to leave your sales job and come be a salesperson for us, and we're just going to pay you commission. That's it. No equity, no salary, no base commission or anything. Like, and they get a bunch of no's, and they're like, I can't find a sales, or they do find someone, they're no good. Do you think that's totally just the wrong way to go about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a big deal. I mean, one of the things that Gordon did really well too in the early days, and has done this, I think, in all his companies. I mean, he gives people ownership, right? They get equity in the company, and might be a 3-year, a 4-year vesting cycle, but they get equity. Yeah,
right.
So they're going to earn it, but it's also saying, hey, I'm going to share with you, and people feel a part of it. So it is it's super hard. I had a mentor early on, and one of the advice he gave me at Sojern, he said, your mindset needs to be and I wrote it on the whiteboard at Sojern, help Sojern be prosperous and successful. So when you think about hiring salespeople, you want to hire salespeople that are thinking from the mindset, how do I help the company be prosperous and be successful? Go out and close smart deals. Closed deals are going to help the company. If you're going to be stingy and you're going to say, I'm only going to pay you off commission, or you're not going to get any equity, well, then they're going to think from a mindset, what do I need to do to take care of me, myself, rather than how do I close deals, or how do I create partnerships that are going to help the company be prosperous and successful because they have an ownership mindset.
Yeah.
That's a big piece too.
I would like to open up the floor to some questions. I think I want to dive into IC Adventures in the Granary district, but I want to kind of keep it in the sales realm first. If anyone has any questions in that area for Chad.
Yeah.
Chad, I have a new startup, just launched their beta in April. How long were the founders in control of the sales before you started hiring out? You have the founder story, you can develop a relationship like nobody else can. So what was that runway before you actually started bringing people in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we hired too many. I mean, I did HR. I mean, I don't even know if we hired many. For us, it took us a year before we had the airline signed. So a lot of it was A/B testing, building out the product, what we were going to do. So in the early days, I don't think we had sales. I mean, we had partnership people, right? Carrie, I don't know, I'm looking at you because you were the founder. Remember? You're like one of them. I mean, it was a while before we had a sales team. I mean, Gordon was, our sales guy, right? So yeah, in the early days, you're your salesperson, and you're telling the story, and you're casting the vision, and getting the people in. So
yeah, the CEO is always the salesperson for the first while.
yeah,
Always.
Yeah.
I'm a salesperson tonight. Bushwhacker doesn't have an open sign. He was a bar.
yeah,
So what am I doing back here? Making sure we have dang open sign.
yeah.
Still the salesperson.
Yeah.
Far along.
Yeah. I was just talking to someone about that the CEO is the person that they're selling to customers. They're selling the story, right, of the value proposition of the company to the customers, to the talent that you're trying to hire, and to the investors. It's like you're constantly in that process. So most startups that are, you're a solo startup or something, like that is your job as a founder.
And I think you just have to be able to read that based upon how it's going, right? I mean, every company is going to be different depending on what stage and where you're at. And there'll be a point where you realize, okay, I've got so much other stuff I'm doing, I'm not getting the time to do this. We need to bring somebody in. Or, sometimes your best salespeople can be someone that's already on your team, that's already, and in the early days, it's like when you don't have anything to sell, you're selling passion, right? You're selling the vision. So look around. Your best salesperson may be on your team, or someone who's a part of it, who you can partner with to help kind of cast that vision and that passion to get them going. So not like 6 months, a year. I mean, you just
big sales team, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm so far away from that
Yeah.
right now. Like,
Yeah.
we're doing it wrong.
Yeah, no, it takes time, and we hired slowly. Like I said, in the early days, we didn't put salespeople everywhere. We had a person in New York because we knew we were going to be working with ad agencies, and you had to have someone in New York. We had someone in the Omaha office that was covering the Midwest, and we hired someone in LA. So in the early days, we had 3 salespeople that kind of started to go. So.
How long was that? A couple years? A year?
Well, it took us a year before we probably had the airlines signed, so then probably, I don't know, probably 6 months, probably a year and a half before we started hiring, but around a year-ish. Yeah, we did that. So.
It's kind of a tough question. So your sales people, what are the different types of things that they sold? Like, what were some of these deals?
Yeah.
What were the different kinds?
So the question was, what are some of the different types of deals that the salespeople were selling?
Yeah.
What were they selling?
Yeah, so in the early days, literally, and some of you guys remember this, some of you are too young that you probably never printed a boarding pass off, but back in 2007 when we started the company, probably from 2007 till 2011, I don't know, you'd print a boarding pass off and there'd be weather, events, and that's how we got in. We put the content on the boarding pass. The weather, the city you were going into, had the top 5 restaurants you could go to and the top 5 things to do. Then we had local and national advertisers that had 300 by 250 ad sizes down the side and a 728 by, I think, 90 ad size, or 728 by, I don't even know what it was, down in the bottom, right? So we sold those ads to local and national advertisers. So we would go out and say, and then if they clicked on the ad, took them to or you also had, when they went to AA.com, you'd have the online, and then when you printed it, you had the print pass. So you had the online and the print. So we would be selling people that, hey, people are holding these, because people didn't have phones. They were holding the boarding pass all day long looking at it. So you were getting multiple impressions. They would see it. They'd print it out the night before. Think about how many times they'd look at it, right? So you had multiple impressions. And then you also had an online component as well. So that's what we were selling. And we could target by region or
The demographic
location.
piece too. Was that part of it?
There wasn't much demographic in the early days because it's just a boarding
Sure,
pass
yeah.
I would print off in Los Angeles. But you'd sell the travelers in general. They're affluent, they're influential, they have disposable income.
Right.
So yeah. So that's what we sold in the early days.
Yeah, I have a question. It sounds like you guys got some pretty huge clients just within the first year or so of being live. And so my question is, I kind of run my own startup. But I'm always intimidated a little bit to go after like bigger companies.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, like, what advice would you have on that?
Yeah. Well, I would say our sales guys that went out to the big companies didn't do well. I mean, the bigger the company is, the longer the sales cycle is, the more, so for us, it was finding that niche. And individual airport parking guys or gals, right? They were small mom and pops, and then we found out a lot of them were connected to one another. So it's finding that niche and going after some of those smaller companies to help grow. I mean, you might get lucky and you might be able to hit a big company, or you might have a really good pain point to be able to solve for them. But I would say in the early days, we didn't close any of those big deals. I mean, we did get big deals with the airlines to do those partnerships, but it takes time. And I think as a salesperson, right, you're saying, like, for me, I'm going, okay, here are my big whales. I got a handful of big whales that I'm going to work, and I'm going to try and get them, but I'm also going to work for the little ones and the mid-tier ones, and I'm going to spread my time out, because what's going to feed you in the early days may be those little partnerships, but there's a point in the evolution of your company where you realize sometimes small guys are going to take just as much time and energy and resources as a big one. So you get some of the little ones going, and you got to kind of balance it out.
It sounds like, too, there was an important factor there where it wasn't like you were going after a bunch of different little pieces. You identified, there's a niche.
Mm-hmm.
This might have a bunch of individual small players.
Yeah.
But I know what I talked about with these parking people, that's
Mm-hmm.
probably going to work when I talk to them, and they're going to know these other
Yep.
people.
Yep.
So it's kind of, I see that a lot in certain organizations where finding that niche of like, okay, they're restaurants, these like solo restaurants, and this is who I have to talk to at that restaurant to actually get the sale. And then once you kind of learn, instead of trying to relearn how to sell to a totally different company each time.
Identify some key verticals,
Yeah.
some strategic people you want to go after, and then you just keep repeating what you're doing. And you're right. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there where they're like, oh, we're working with so-and-so, or working with so-and-so. And then they're like, oh, okay. And they jump on, or they talk to one another within their industry. And it's kind of saying, all right, what's a problem we can solve and solve really well, and identify some of those specific verticals or niches or whatever that you really want to go after, and kind of just gradually get there. But hey, if you can go out the gates and pull off a big partnership with a big company, then do that as well. I mean, work them both. Don't just do one or the other. That's what I'd say.
I think we have time for one more.
With so many different ad formats and DSPs, how do you stay relevant with what's going on in the industry? Are there certain newsletters you read, or do you recommend any books to stay current in the trends?
I mean, there's a lot of great organizations out there, ad networks, or just, podcasts or ad, I don't know, Brad, you're probably you're probably in the data. Well, Brad is one of our sales guys at Sojern, and Ed is one of our early technology guys, and has been around doing all kinds of stuff for us at Sojern.
To some extent, you're going to deal with Google no matter what.
Yeah.
I know you're an avid reader, so to tie into that, is there any books you would recommend? Just in general?
Yeah.
entrepreneurs?
Well, yeah. I mean, from a sales perspective, Mark Hunter is a local guy here. A lot of people don't even realize he's local, because he's one of the biggest sales speakers in the whole entire nation, and he's hardly ever here. But he wrote a book last year called A Mind for Sales, which is awesome. And he also wrote High Profit Prospecting, which is great. So both of those, I think, are probably two of the best sales books I've ever read. When you think about team stuff, I'm a big guy of Patrick Lencioni. Wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, how you really build good teams and culture. So I'm a big John Maxwell guy. Any podcasts that John Maxwell has, he has an executive podcast, and then also has the John Maxwell Leadership podcast, which are great because he's actually speaking through it, giving a talk, and then they have a little part at the end where they break it down, opposed to a lot of podcasts. You're just listening to people talk back and forth, and you might get 3 or 4 good nuggets in it, but you will get tons of really good business information in those. So
Great. So before we wrap up, let's talk about what you're working on now, what you and Gordon has spearheaded with this IC Adventures in the Granary District.
yeah.
Because I think that's going to be relevant for a lot of people here.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, Gordon was smarter than a lot of us, which he is, and he also had a large amount of founder stock. And so in 2018, we had about $118 million VC fund came in and gave us $118 million for a third of the company. And so what happens is your founder stock is like really small. And so when the company has grown, you get this little thing that's called a capital gain, because you've just sold something that was not worth anything and you sold it. And so that's usually about a 27%
It's going to go up to
percentage.
49.
Yeah, it's probably going to go up to 40%. But anyway, and at the same time, he realized that if you take that capital gain and you reinvest it into a business in a qualified opportunity zone, or real estate, or develop real estate in a qualified opportunity zone, you can defer your capital gains tax until the end of 2026. And all of you that are entrepreneurs, if you have an extra 27 to 30% of your money that you can put to work for you for 5 or 6 years, that's awesome. You get to defer that capital gains tax. But the biggest piece of it is if you start businesses in a qualified opportunity zone, if you do real estate in a qualified opportunity zone, you also get a step up in bases and some different things as well. But if you sell it after 10 years, you don't pay any capital gains on the growth. So, which is huge. So you look at a company like Sojern, that $118 million, you would have had an extra 27% of your money on that. So what Gordon did is he started looking all over the country. There's 8,800 opportunity zones all over the country. And so he flew to Arizona, California, different places all over the world to find a place to invest his money into in these qualified opportunity zones. And then he found out Ralston, right here in Omaha, the farthest west and south. There's 44 in Nebraska, 16 in Omaha. This is the farthest west and south one that there is. That Ralston was qualified opportunity zone, and he found this really cool piece of land. This is an 88,000 square foot building here called the Old Ralston Granary. There's about 6.5 acres of land here and bought it all. And so we're redeveloping this old building that's almost 100 years old. Really cool arching ceilings, putting an office space here. You're all right here. This is the business Accelerator that Event Vesta and IC Ventures here, different startups. And then we're building some really nice 2-bedroom lofts up here, or not lofts, they're 2-bedroom flats. That's the word, flats. And then we've got some 600 square feet office space, retail space down here as well, and then 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes as well. So the idea is creating an ecosystem for entrepreneurs to live, to work, to play, to do some exciting things. We also have a 14,000 square foot we're calling Granary Green, which is right out here, 27-foot LED for outdoor concerts, events, all kinds of cool things. So we're excited to not only invest into startups here, but we've got some really cool lease space, and we can actually help you become a qualified opportunity zone business. And Gordon has said this, if he'll never start another business again not in a qualified opportunity zone, because the benefits are huge. So
Is that
that's what we're doing here.
is that applicable then for like I know we've talked about this before, like startups that are thinking about where to headquarter themselves that have the potential to have this kind of growth?
Yep.
Is that something that they should be considering?
Yeah. This is where you want to be, because one, not only is it an opportunity for you to, once you sell your company, hold it for 10 years and sell it, but there are people that are just like Gordon, this is the biggest thing, all over the country that have capital gains in a qualified opportunity zone fund that they have to deploy that money within 6 months. And if they want to invest it in a qualified opportunity zone business, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to raise money. So that alone makes it golden to try and figure out how you get your business qualified as a qualified opportunity zone. And so when we bring companies in, and we'll help them get qualified. We've got lease space that people can be here and work here. Some of the companies that we'll invest in, we'll help them with sales or marketing and different things. And we're really an accelerator. We want to take companies that already are out, have things happening, and we're going to help accelerate them. So that's kind of what our niche is. And so we look forward to companies that have gotten started and going, and we want to help accelerate them.
Cool.
So.
Do we have any questions about that before we wrap up? Andrew.
I was just going to add one thing that's, I think, Jen undersold the most exciting part as sort of founders, that not only is there a tax advantage on the way in, but there's a tax advantage on the way out.
Yeah.
Where everything on the back side is also able to for long enough without subject to capital gains.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you can create the company in a way where your founder stock is triggered through a capital gain, which doesn't have to be selling stock in a different company. It can just be selling a car or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I sold an RV. It was awesome.
How'd you get a capital gain on an RV though? That's what
Well, that's because it was COVID, man. You pivot during COVID. Everyone wanted RVs. Nobody wanted to drive. That was their vacation. So I got a great deal on it when I bought it like 5 years earlier. And then, I'm like, what? This thing's worth like $30 grand more than what I paid for it.
Yep.
So, and I will tell you, the other one is if you've leased a car, that lease is going to come up, and that car is worth a lot more probably
Right now.
than what it was 3 years ago when you did the lease. So I know a buddy of mine that made out on bandits because he bought the car and then sold it. And so if you're under a lease, it's probably worth a lot more than the initial sale back price that you sold it for. That could be a capital gain as well. Yeah.
Yep.
You
Leave
might
it.
have said this, but do you have to deploy all 118 million to defer those capital gains tax, or do you just have to put it in a fund with intentions?
Whatever part of the capital gain that you put in there, right? You don't have to put the whole thing in there. Whatever you decide to put in there,
But that's the piece where it needs. If you put it in there with
that piece of
it
it,
needs to be deployed within 6 months. It can't just sit in that
yeah,
fund.
has to be deployed within 6 months, and then you can deploy it into a qualified opportunity zone business. So, what Gordon did is he made 6 businesses, and then after that, put the money in all 6 of those businesses. Yeah. And the best part is when we bought this 88,000 square foot building, there just happened to be this country bar in the basement of it, which we didn't realize it until we went through the lease that, oh crap, we now own Bushwhackers. So Gordon was smart enough to put an owner operator in charge of it, which is really awesome. But we have this really fun 14,000 square foot country bar with a bowl and fun stuff. So I will be around, answer more questions, talk with you, and if you would like to continue the happy hour, over to Bushwhackers. I got a drink ticket and we'll get you in for free. How's that? No charge, and you can come over and have a drink. So happy to stay around as long as you guys want and ask questions. And anyway, thanks.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. This has been our first startup grind in Omaha. We'll hope to have many more. You can always go to startupgrind.com/Omaha to learn more. I want to thank again IC Adventures for hosting us here and for being a partner with us, Event Vesta for helping us out with the promotion, BSO Studio for helping us out with the organizational piece, and Nebraska Tech Collaborative for doing so much that they do with the tech talent in the area. And thank you all for coming and making this an in-person real event with real faces. It's great.
Yeah, it's awesome to see you.